Good morning, all. Welcome to today's live stream. Today we will be revising the Age of Revolutions. Age of Revolutions. (1830 to 1848). Complete revision in 50 minutes. This covers Age of Revolutions from 1830 to 1848, Romanticism and national feeling, hunger, hardship and popular revolt, revolt of the liberals in 1848. Age of Revolution 1830 to 1848. After the Congress of Vienna 1815, conservative rulers tried to restore monarchy and suppress nationalism. But liberalism and nationalism spread across Europe. But liberalism and nationalism spread across Europe. Leaders: educated middle class. This included professors, teachers, lawyers, businessmen, and clerks. The revolutions: July Revolution that occurred in France 1830. Bourbon kings were overthrown. Louis Philippe became constitutional monarch, inspired revolutions across Europe. Belgium 1830 broke away from Netherlands, became independent. Greek War of Independence began in 1821 against Ottoman Empire, supported by Europeans. Lord Byron supported Greece and died in 1821. Independence recognized by Treaty of Constantinople 1832. Famous quote is by Metternich: "When France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches cold." The Age of Revolutions 1830 to 1848. As conservative regimes tried to consolidate their power, liberalism and nationalism came to be increasingly associated with the revolution in many regions of Europe, such as Italian and German states, the provinces of Ottoman Empire, Ireland, and Poland. These revolutions were led by the liberal nationalists belonging to the educated middle class elite, among whom were professors, school teachers, clerks, members of the commercial middle class. The first upheaval took place in France in July 1830. The Bourbon kings, who had been restored to power during the conservative reaction after 1815, were overthrown now by liberal revolutionaries, who installed a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe at its head. When France sneezes, Metternich once remarked, the rest of Europe catches cold. The July Revolution sparked an uprising in Brussels, which led to Belgium breaking away the United Kingdom of Netherlands. An event that mobilized national feelings among the educated elite across Europe was the Greek War of Independence. Greece had been part of the Ottoman Empire since the 15th century. The growth of revolutionary nationalism in Europe sparked off a struggle for independence among us, the Greek, which began in 1821. The nationalists in Greece got support from other Greeks living in exile and also from many West Europeans who had sympathies for ancient Greek culture. Poets and artists lauded Greece as the cradle of European civilization and mobilized public opinion to support its struggle against Muslim empire. The English poet Lord Byron organized funds and later went to fight in the war War, where he died of fever in 1824. Finally, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. Romanticism and national feeling. Nationalism developed through culture. Romanticism. Romanticism, a cultural movement emphasizing emotions, imagination, folk traditions, and national identity, criticized excessive reason and excessive science. Eugen Delacroix, he painted the famous painting The Massacre at Chios in 1824, shows suffering of Greeks, created sympathy for Greek independence, spread nationalist feelings. Johann Gottfried Herder believed Das Volk is for common people and Volksgeist is the spirit of the nation. True culture existed among ordinary people. National identity could be found in folk songs, folk dances, and folk poetry. Poland and nationalism. Poland was partitioned by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Karol Kurpinski promoted nationalism through music. He made Polonaise and Mazurka. They were symbols of Polish nationalism. Language as resistance. 1831, Polish revolt against Russia failed. Afterwards, Russian imposed in schools, Polish used in churches, Polish language became the symbol of resistance. Romantic imagination and national feeling. The development of nationalism did not come about only through wars and territorial expansion. Culture played an important role in creating the idea of nation. Art, poetry, stories, music helped express and shape nationalist feelings. Let us look at Romanticism, a cultural movement which sought to develop a particular form of nationalist sentiment. Romantic artists, poets generally criticized the glorification of reason and science. They criticized the glorification of reason and science and focused on instead of emotion, intuitions, and mystical feelings. Their effort was to create a sense of shared collective heritage, a common cultural past as the basis of nation. Other romantics such as German philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder claimed that true German culture was to be discovered among the common people, das Volk. It was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of nations Volksgeist was popularized. So, collecting and recording these forms of folk culture was essential to the project of nation building. The emphasis on vernacular language and the collection of local folklore was not just to recover an ancient national spirit but also to carry the modern nationalist message to large audiences who were mostly illiterate. This was especially so in the case of Poland, which had been partitioned at the end of 18th century by the great powers Russia, Prussia, and Austria. Even though Poland no longer existed as an independent territory, nationalist feelings were kept alive through music and language. Karol Kurpinski, for example, celebrated the national struggle through his operas and music. turning folk dances like the Polonaise and Mazurka into nationalist symbols. Language too played an important role in developing nationalist sentiments. After Russian occupation, the Polish language was forced out of schools and the Russian language was imposed everywhere. In 1831, an armed rebellion against Russian rule took place, which ultimately crushed. Following this, many members of the clergy in Poland began to use language as a weapon of national resistance. Polish was used for church gatherings and all religious instructions. As a result, a large number of priests and bishops were put in jail or sent to Siberia by the Russian authorities as punishment for their refusal to preach in Russian. The use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of the struggle against Russian dominance. Hunger, hardship, and popular revolt. Economic crisis of 1830. Population growth, more people than jobs. Unemployment increased. Migration, villagers moved to cities, cities overcrowded, slums developed. Problems for small producers. England was highly industrialized. Cheap machine good cheap machine made goods flooded markets. Most affected in textile industry because production still occurred in homes and small workshops. Problems of peasants. Peasants suffered feudal dues and obligations to landlord. Food crisis occurred due to bad harvest, rising food prices. Result, pauperism, extreme poverty. French Revolution of 1848 causes hunger, unemployment and economic hardship. Result, Louis Philippe was fled. Republic proclaimed, universal male suffrage introduced, right to work guaranteed and national workshops were established. Silesian Weavers Revolt in 1848 caused contractors reduced payments, described by Wilhelm Wolff. Events 4 June 1845. Weavers marched to contractors' mansion, demanded higher wages. Contractor mocked them, threatened them. Weavers smashed furniture and windows, looted warehouse, destroyed cloth. Contractor turned with the army. Result, 11 weavers were shot dead. Hunger, hardship and popular revolt. The 1830s were years of great economic hardship in Europe. 1830s were years of great economic hardship in Europe. The first half of the 19th century saw an enormous increase in population all over Europe. In most countries, there were more seekers of job than employment. Population from rural areas migrated to the cities to live in overcrowded slums. Small producers in town were often faced with stiff competition from imports of cheap machine-made goods from England, where industrialization was more advanced than on the continent. This is especially so in textile production, which was carried out mainly in homes or small workshops and was only partly mechanized. In those regions of Europe where the aristocracy still enjoyed power, peasants struggled under the burden of feudal dues and obligations. The rise of food prices or a year of bad harvest led to widespread pauperism in town and country. The year 1848 was one such year. Food shortages and widespread unemployment brought the population of Paris out on the roads. Barricades were erected and Louis Philippe was forced to flee. A national assembly proclaimed a republic, granted suffrage to all adult males above 21, guaranteed the right to work. National workshops to provide employment were set up. Earlier in 1845, weavers of Silesia had led a revolt against contractors who supplied them raw material and gave them orders for finished textiles but drastically reduced their payments. The journalist Wilhelm Wolff described the events in a Silesian village as follows. In this village with 18,000 inhabitants, cotton weaving is the most widespread occupation. The misery of the workers is extreme. The desperate need for jobs has been taken advantage of by the contractors to reduce the prices of the goods they order. On June 4 to 2 pm, a large crowd of weavers emerged from their homes and marched in pairs up to the mansion of their contractor demanding higher wages. They were treated with scorn and threats alternately. Following this, a group of them forced their way into a house, smashed its elegant window panes, furniture, porcelain. Another group broke into the storehouse and plundered it of supplies of cloth which they tore to shreds. The contractor fled with his family to a neighboring village, which, however, refused to shelter such a person. He returned 24 hours later, having requested the army. In the exchange that followed, 11 waivers were shot. The Revolution of Liberals in 1848, led by educated middle class that include professionals, businessmen, and prosperous artisans. Impact of French Revolution 1848. The France Republic were established, universal male suffrage was introduced, inspired liberals across Europe. Liberal demands: constitutional government, national unification, freedom of press, freedom of association, parliamentary government. Frankfurt Parliament was conducted on 18 May 1848, place St. Paul's Church, Frankfurt, representative 831 elected representatives. Goal: unified Germany, constitutional and constitutional monarchy. Constitutional monarchy meaning king remains the ruler, constitution limits powers, parliament exists. Frederick Wilhelm IV, King of Prussia. Frankfurt Parliament offered him crown. He rejected it because the throne came from elected representative, not traditional rulers. Why Frankfurt Parliament failed? Opposition from aristocrats, monarchs, and military. Lost support of workers, artisans. Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected crown. Result: troop disbanded, assembly. Women in liberal movement. Women formed associations, published newspapers, attended meetings, participated in demonstrations. But no voting rights, no representation at Frankfurt Parliament, allowed only as observers, sat in visitors' gallery. Reforms after failure of 1848 revolutions. Although conservatives won, they could not fully restore old order. Important reforms: Habsburg dominions, serfdom abolished, Russia bonded labor abolished, and Hungary greater autonomy granted in 1867. 1848, the Revolution of Liberals. Parallel to the revolts of the poor, unemployed, and starving peasants, workers in many European countries in the 1848, a revolution led by educated middle class was underway. Events of February 1848 in France had brought about the abdication of the monarch, and a republic based on universal male suffrage had been proclaimed. In other parts of Europe, where independent nation states did not yet exist, such as Germany, Italy, Poland, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, men and women of the liberal middle class combined their demands for constitutionalism with national unification. They took advantage of the growing popular unrest to push their demands for the creation of a nation state on parliamentary principles, a constitution, freedom of the press, and freedom of association. In the German regions, a large number of political associations whose members were middle class professionals, businessmen, and prosperous artisans came together in the city of Frankfurt and decided to vote for an all German National Assembly. On 18 May 1848, 831 elected representatives marched in a festive procession to take their place in the Frankfurt Parliament, convened in the Church of St. Paul. They drafted a constitution for a German nation to be headed by a monarchy subject to a parliament. When the deputies offered the crown on these terms to Frederick Wilhelm IV, King of Prussia, he rejected it and joined other monarchs to oppose the elected assembly. While the opposition of the aristocracy and military became stronger, the social basis of parliament eroded. The parliament was dominated by the middle classes who resisted the demands of workers and artisans and consequently lost their support. In the end, troops were called in and the assembly was forced to disband. The issue of extending political rights to women was a controversial one within the liberal movement, in which large numbers of women had participated actively over the years. Women had formed their own political associations, founded newspapers, and taken part in political meetings and demonstrations. Despite this, they were denied suffrage rights during the election of assembly. When the Frankfurt Parliament convened in the Church of St. Paul, women were admitted only as observers to stand in the visitors' gallery. Though conservative forces were able to suppress liberal movements, in 1848 they could not restore the old order. Monarchs were beginning to realize that the cycles of revolution and repression could only be ended by granting concession to the liberal nationalist revolutionaries. Hence, in the years after 1848, the autocratic monarchies of the Central Eastern Europe began to introduce the changes that had already taken place in Western Europe before 1815. Thus, serfdom and bonded labor were abolished both in the Habsburg dominions and in Russia. The Habsburg rulers granted more autonomy to the Hungarians in 1867. This was Frankfurt Parliament. Frankfurt Parliament in the Church of St. Paul. Contemporary color print. Notice the woman in the upper left of gallery. Here, in the upper left of gallery, you can see women's. Now we will do some MCQs. Most important dates: 1815 Congress of Vienna. 1821 Greek War of Independence begin. 1824 Massacre at Chaos painted by Lord Byron. Massacre at Chaos painted, and also Lord Byron dies. 1830 July Revolution in France. 1830 Belgium become independent. 1831 Polish Revolt. 1832 Treaty of Constantinople. 1845 Silesian Weavers Revolt, and 1848 French Revolution. 18 May 1848 Frankfurt Parliament, and 1867 Hungary gets autonomy. Metternich was the conservative leader after 1815. Louis Philippe, constitutional monarch of France in 1830. Lord Byron supported Greece. Eugene Delacroix painted Massacre at Chaos. Johann Gottfried Herder introduced Das Volk and Volksgeist concept. Karol Krupinski was Polish nationalist composer. Wilhelm Wolff described weaver's misery. Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected German crown. 10 one-line facts for boards. Das Volk, common people. Volksgeist, spirit of nation. Pauperism, extreme poverty. Polonaise and mazurka, Polish nationalist dances. National workshops, employment for workers. Universal male suffrage introduced in France in 1848. Frankfurt Parliament met at St. Paul's Church. 831 representatives attended Frankfurt Parliament. Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected the German crown. 11 Silesian weavers were shot dead. Who described nationalism as being reflected in the culture of the common people. Das Volk. Johann Gottfried Herder. Johann Gottfried Herder believed that the true spirit of a nation could be found among the common people, that is Das Volk, through their folk songs, dances, languages and traditions. Which event came first? July Revolution in France 1830, Treaty of Constantinople 1832, Greek War of Independence began in 1821, Frankfurt Parliament 1848. So Greek War of Independence began in 1821. Greek War of Independence began in 1821. 1821 Greek War of Independence begins. 1830 July Revolution in France. 1832 Treaty of Constantinople. 1848 Frankfurt Parliament. Which pair is incorrectly matched? Volksgeist, spirit of the nation. Das Volk, common people. Pauperism means national unity, and national workshops, employment for workers. Incorrectly matched. Pauperism, that means poverty and not national unity. See. Volksgeist, spirit of nation. Das Volk, common people. Pauperism, extreme poverty. National workshops, employment for workers. Why did Frederick Wilhelm IV reject the crown offered by the Frankfurt Parliament? He wanted to become king of France. He opposed to German unification completely. He refused a crown offered by elected representatives. He was not the king of Prussia. He refused a crown offered by elected representatives. Frederick William IV believed that a king should receive authority from traditional rulers, not from an elected parliament. This rejection was one of the major reasons for the failure of the Frankfurt Parliament. Which of the following events directly led to the Louis Philippe fleeing France? French Revolution of 1848. Because of food shortages, unemployment, economic hardship, people revolted in Paris and Louis Philippe was forced to flee. France became a republic, universal male suffrage introduced, right to work guaranteed, and national workshops were established. Which of the following correctly matches the person and contribution? Wilhelm Wolff rejected the German crown. No. Frederick. It was Louis Philippe, who rejected the German. Sorry, Wilhelm of Wilhelm IV rejected the crown of German. Karol Krupinski promoted Polish nationalism through music. Yes, that is correct. Lord Byron hosted the Congress of Vienna. No. Herder painted the massacre at Chaos. No. So it is B. Karol Krupinski promoted Polish nationalism through music. Wilhelm Wolff described the misery of the Silesian weavers. Karol Krupinski promoted Polish nationalism through Polonaise and Mazurka. Lord Byron supported Greek independence. Herder developed the ideas of Das Volk and Volksgeist. Which factor most weakened the Frankfurt Parliament? Which factor most weakened the Frankfurt Parliament? Support from workers and artisans, acceptance of the crown by Frederick Wilhelm IV, loss of support from workers and artisans. C. Frankfurt Parliament gradually lost strength because workers withdrew support, artisans withdrew support, aristocrats opposed it, military forces opposed it, Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected the crown. This combination led to its failure. Which of the following happened in 1831? 1831, Polish revolt against Russian rule. Important dates revision. 1821 Greek War of Independence begins. 1830 July Revolution in France. 1831 Polish revolt against Russian rule. 1832 Treaty of Constantinople. And 1845 Silesian Weavers Revolt, French Revolution and Frankfurt Parliament. And in 1867 Hungary gets autonomy. Which of the following is the correct sequence? July Revolution, Greek independence begins, Frankfurt Parliament. Frankfurt Parliament 1848, Greek independence begins in 1821, July Revolution in 1831. Sorry, 1830. So first will be Greek independence begins, then July Revolution, then Frankfurt Parliament. Correct chronology. 1821 Greek War of Independence begins, 1830 July Revolution in France, and in 1848 Frankfurt Parliament. Which one of the following pairs is correctly matched? Lord Byron, Frankfurt Parliament, Frederick Wilhelm IV, King of Prussia, Wilhelm Wolff, Das Volk and Delacroix, Polonaise and Mazurka. Lord Byron, Frankfurt Parliament, Frederick Wilhelm IV, King of Prussia, Wilhelm of Dasvok, correctly matched. Frederick Wilhelm IV, King of Prussia. Lord Byron supported Greek independence, not Frankfurt Parliament. Frederick Wilhelm IV was the King of Prussia, and Wilhelm IV described the misery of Silesian weavers, not Dasvok. Delacroix painted the massacre at Chaos, not Polonaise and Mazurka. Which of the following became a symbol of resistance against Russian domination in Poland? Which of the following became a symbol of resistance against Russian domination in Poland? Polish language. After the 1831 Polish revolt failed, Russian was imposed in schools. Polish was removed from many official uses. Priests continued using Polish in churches. The Polish language became a symbol of national resistance against Russian domination. Which of the following was a direct result of the February Revolution of 1848 in France? Establishment of a constitutional monarchy under Louis Philippe. Universal male suffrage. Unification of Germany. Independence of Greece. Universal male suffrage. February Revolution of 1848 in France led to France becoming republic. Universal male suffrage, all adult males above 21 could vote. Right to work guaranteed. National workshop established. Who painted the massacre at Chaos, which helped create sympathy for the Greek struggle? Who painted the massacre at Chaos, which helped create sympathy for Greek struggle? Eugene Delacroix. Yes, Eugene Delacroix painted the massacre at Chaos 1824. Showed the suffering of Greeks under Ottoman rule, created sympathy for Greek independence movement, helped spread nationalist feelings across Europe. Which of the following is incorrectly matched? Dasvok, common people, Volksgate, spirit of nation, pauperism, extreme poverty, national workshops, German unification. National workshops, German unification. National workshops were introduced for employment. Thus, for common people, Volksgate, spirit of the nation, pauperism, extreme poverty, national workshops, employment for unemployed workers in France. Which of the following events is correctly matched with its outcome? Frankfurt Parliament, successful German unification in 1848, Silesian weavers revolt, immediate increase in wages, French Revolution of 1848, France became a republic, Polish revolt of 1831, Poland became independent. Frankfurt Parliament. I think A will be the right answer. Oh, French Revolution of 1840. France became republic was the main. Frankfurt Parliament successful German unification in 1848. No, the Frankfurt Parliament failed. Silesian weavers revolt suppressed and 11 weavers were shot dead. French Revolution of 1848. As a result, France became republic. Polish revolt of 1831. Poland became independent. The revolt failed. Which one of the following dates is correctly matched? Congress of Vienna in 1830, Greek War of Independence begins in 1821, Frankfurt Parliament in 1845, Hungary granted autonomy in 1848. Greek War of Independence began in 1821. Congress of Vienna 1815, not 1830. Greek War of Independence began in 1821. Frankfurt Parliament in 1848, not 1845. Hungary granted autonomy in 1867, not 1848. Which person is correctly associated with the Silesian weavers' revolt? Frederick. No. Wilhelm Wolff. Wilhelm Wolff described the miserable conditions of the Silesian weavers and their exploitation by contractors. Lord Byron supported Greek independence. Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected German crown. Wilhelm Wolff described Silesian weavers' revolt, and Metternich was a conservative leader after 1815. Which of the following reforms was introduced after the 1848 revolution? Restoration of serfdom? No. Abolition of serfdom in Habsburg dominance? Not. In Habsburg. Universal female suffrage across Europe? No. End of all monarchies? No. I think abolition of serfdom in Habsburg dominions. The praise abolition of serfdom in Habsburg dominions. Yes, it is correct. After the failure of 1848 revolutions, conservatives returned to power, but they could not completely restore the old order. Important reforms: serfdom abolished in Habsburg dominions, bonded labor abolished in Russia, Hungary received greater autonomy in 1867. Which of the following groups was allowed to attend the Frankfurt Parliament only as observers? Only as observers. Woman. Women actively participated in the liberal movement by publishing newspapers, forming political associations, participating in demonstrations, attending political meetings. However, they could not vote. They could not become representatives. They could attend the Frankfurt Parliament only as observers and sit in the visitors' gallery. Which of the following correctly matches the person and event? Metternich, Frankfurt Parliament, Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected the German crown, Delacroix, Polish Revolt of 1831, Karol Kurpinski, Congress of Vienna. Frederick Wilhelm IV, who rejected the German crown. B. Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected the German crown. Quick check. Metternich, a conservative leader, not Frankfurt Parliament. Frederick Wilhelm IV rejected the crown offered by the Frankfurt Parliament. Delacroix painted the massacre at chaos. Karol Kurpinski promoted Polish nationalism through music. Only one mistake in the mixed revision set. Excellent. Thank you. Grand Revision Challenge 2. Which one of the following is the correct chronological order? Polish Revolt in 1831, July Revolution 1830, Greek War of Independence started in 1821, Frankfurt Parliament 1848. Last will be Frankfurt Parliament. First will be Greek War of Independence. The option B is the right. 1821, 1830, 1831, 1848. Which of the following was not a demand of the liberal nationalist? Which of the following was not a demand of the liberal nationalist? Which of the following was not a demand of the liberal nationalist? Freedom of the press, constitutional government, national unification, restoration of feudal privileges. Restoration of feudal privileges because they hate feudal privileges. They doesn't want feudal privileges. The liberal nationalists wanted to abolish feudal privileges, not restore them. Their main demands: constitutional government, national unification, freedom of the press, freedom of association, parliamentary government. They opposed absolute monarchy, feudal privileges, and aristocratic dominance. Which of the following best explains why culture became important for nationalism? Culture helped government collect taxes. Culture created a shared identity among people. Culture increased industrial production. Culture strengthened feudalism. B is the right answer. Culture created a shared identity among people. Nationalism grew not only through wars and political movements but also through folk songs, folk dances, folk poetry, language, art, and paintings. These helped people feel that they belonged to the same nation. Which of the following is correctly matched? Treaty of Constantinople 1832, July Revolution 1821, Frankfurt Parliament 1830, and Silesian Revolt 1848. Treaty of Constantinople in 1832. Which one of the following statement is true? The Frankfurt Parliament successfully unified Germany in 1848. Women in the Frankfurt Parliament had voting rights and could become representatives. The Polish language became a symbol of resistance against Russian rule. Frederick Wilhelm IV accepted the crown offered by the Frankfurt Parliament. C will be the right answer. The Polish language became a symbol of resistance against Russian rule. Yes. Frankfurt Parliament successfully unified Germany in 1848. No, it failed and has disbanded by troops. Women had voting rights. No, women could only sit as observers in the visitors' gallery. Polish language became a symbol of resistance against Russian rule. That's the right answer. Frederick Wilhelm IV accepted the crown. No, he rejected it. You have a strong grasp of Greek independence, Romanticism, Herder, Das Werk, Workgeist, Polish nationalism, hunger, hardship and popular revolt, Silesian Weavers Revolt, Revolution of 1848, Frankfurt Parliament, Frederick Wilhelm IV, women's role in nationalism. Who said that the true German culture was to be discovered among the common people? It's Johann Gottfried Herder. Guys, today's revision is completed and we have successfully revised the age of revolutions from 1830 to 1848. Yes.